The Greater Evil by Peter Fehervari, found in the anthology The Door Coil, Damnation by Black Library. Evil grows from within, not without. It is a disharmony of the self, not the shadow of some elusive, predatory other. The Yashu Kaor. The first circle. Outside. No matter how often Voyle relieves it, the end always begins the same way. A deep clang reverberates through the airlock as the sable star's boarding umbilical latches onto the derelict ship. Voyle checks the AirTag strapped to the back of the trooper beside him, then turns so his comrade can return the gesture. The routine is mirrored by every member of the squad with practiced swiftness. They have run through it twice already, yet nobody hesitates, nobody complains. A void breacher's life hangs by the integrity of his tank, as much as his weapons. Squad Indigo is blood tight, Voyle reports into his helmet box when the ritual is complete. Repeat, blood tight. Blood tight confirmed, Indigo. Lieutenant Joliffe acknowledges from the bridge, unable to hide the tension in his voice. Captain Bester took his own life 14 days ago. Nobody knows why, but they all sense Joliffe isn't ready to lead the company. Not on this warp-cursed patrol. Voyle has considered seizing command. No one will stand in his way, least of all Joliffe, but then the burden of choice will be his to carry. No, it is better to live or die with clean hands. Commence bridge, Joliffe orders. Emperor walk with you, Indigo. With a hydraulic hiss, the external hatch slides into its recess, revealing the metal tube of the umbilical. Most of the strip lumens running its length have failed, and those that still work flicker fitfully. The company's 5-month tour of the Damocles perimeter has taken a heavy toll on both supplies and men, including both its engine seers. The Sable Star was just 3 days out from Caste when it found the intruder, silent and powerless, yet perfectly intact. Its mark is designated as the Halvor Sen, but through the massive derelict is evidently imperial in origin. They can find no record of it. That is not unusual, for numberless ships ply the vast tracks of the Imperium, and countless more have been lost over the millennia. Factoring in the contortions of the warp, the derelict might be decades or even centuries old. It is a cumbersome hulk devoid of guns or advanced sensor arrays. Probably a civilian cargo freighter, and certainly no match for a warship like the Sable Star. But that is little reassurance for the men tasked with boarding it. With derelicts, it is what lies within that matters, for the void crawls with phantoms seeking the solace of metal or flesh. Let it rot, Voyle wants to say. Better yet, blast it back into the wrap. But instead, he says what he always says. Acknowledged, crossing commences, and enters the umbilical. He's a void breacher. This is what the Astra Militarium has trained him for. They lied to us, Voyle yells at his former self. But it is a silent cry, for if the ghosts of the past are without eyes, so those of the future are without voice. The void breacher's magnetized boots clatter on the corrugated decking as they advance along the narrow tunnel one by one, their helmet lights slicing back and forth. The concertinated tube creaks and shudders around them as it strains to keep the ships conjoined, the living to the dead. Despite their sealed carapace armor and thermal padding, the cold is gnawing at them within seconds, and their movements grow sluggish before they are halfway across. The rasping exhalations from their helmets are like steam in the frigid air, forcing them to wipe their visors clean after each respiration, lest breath becomes blinding frost. Voyle halts as your light finds the derelict's access hatch. The metal is dark and beaded, constructing starkly with the gleaming umbilical clamps that encircle it. One glance tells him the locking mechanism is hopelessly corroded. "Cut us a door, Hoining," he orders, moving aside as the squad specialist steps forward. He watches as the trooper engraves a glowing oval around the hatch with a last cutter. The tool's power pack whines and Voyle wills it to fail, knowing it won't. It never does. The nightmare won't allow it. "Don't bridge, Sergeant," Hoining says, then shoves the hatch. With a screech of harrowed metal, it crashes into the darkness beyond. As the reverberations subside, Voyle levels his melter gun and steps through. His own shriek wrenched him back from the brink. "But I've already fallen," Voyle thought quietly as he surged to his feet. "There is no coming back." The nightmare fractured and fell away in sluggish fragments, revealing a large, windowless chamber. Its walls were tessellated with hexagonal panels that glowed softly, washing the space in subdued blue light. Voyle stood at its center, his bare feet tangled in a silvery blanket. He tore himself free and spun around, trying to make sense of things. Where? He froze as he caught sight of something watching him from one of the walls. Black eyes gleaming with a hunger colder than the void. The sound that rose in his throat was somewhere between a scream, a snarl, and a sigh, born of fear and loathing and longing. Voyle stifled it as the predator dissolved into a human form. A woman. It was crouched in a recess to the opposite wall, where a hexagonal panel had retracted. Her eyes glinting in the gloom as she appraised him. Her face was tattooed with concentric rings, the first shooting through her forehead, cheeks, and chin, the second encircling her eyes and mouth, and the third set directly between her eyes. Voyle knew she bore a fourth and final ring, but its lines were invisible, for it embraced the mind. Unity. Voyle breathed, naming the symbol and remembering. The woman's tattoos mirrored those on his own face. With that recollection, the rest flooded back, and he scanned the chamber quickly. But the other serenity cells were still sealed. Only the woman, who always slept with hers open, had been roused by his nightmare, and she wouldn't say anything to the others. "Forgive me, sister," Voyle said. "I was walking old roads." Her expression gave nothing away. Sometimes she seemed as inscrutable as their liberators. True, they had been comrades since Voile's emancipation from the Imperium almost 5 ago. They had exchanged few words. Other than her name, Erzul, he knew little about her save her loyalty to the cause and her talent as a pathfinder. But that was fine by Voyle. He was not much inclined to talk about his own past either. Remembering was bad enough. Dreaming, even worse. Why now? He wondered, reluctantly considering the old nightmare. It hadn't troubled him in years. Not since he mastered the mantras of self-sublimation during his induction. He'd almost convinced himself it was a false memory, as his instructors had encouraged. Almost. Voyle rubbed the old scar under his chin. It was itching furiously, as if inflamed by the sting of the past. He wasn't going to sleep again this circle. Maybe the sour sweet tranquility wafers the liberators issued, their auxiliaries were losing their potency. I should report it, Voyle brooded, knowing he wouldn't. He trusted the liberators, of course, but his weakness shamed him. Voyle, damn it! He should have taken a sail. At least that way he'd kept his nightmares to himself. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, and a head taller than anyone else in his squad, let alone the liberators, but that wasn't why he shunned the Serenity cells. If his commander had demanded it, he would have squeezed into one of the hexagonal coffins. But the Stormwind had not pressed the issue. That wasn't his ways. "It is your shadow to burn," the Xenos had said. Indeed, he found his subordinates tread with an acuity that would have confounded the imperial officers Voyle had served under. "You alone can light the fire." But the ship was already 5 days into its voyage, and that fire remained unlit. Every sleep cycle, Voyle had bedded down at the center of the chamber, ignoring the questioning looks of his squads as they climbed into their cells. "Doesn't matter," he thought as he pulled his boots on. His loathing of tight spaces was only a whisper of the shadow that stalked him. "I'll be in the firegrounds," he told Erzul as he stepped towards a wall. It slid open at his approach, revealing a brightly lit corridor. Nothing could hide in that crisp, sane light. "Bright black eyes. Why now?" Voyle asked again. A new life and purpose hadn't dispelled the shadow. It had simply lain dormant, waiting for him to wake up. The Seeker faced the maelstrom of swirling prismatic mist, with his back straight and his staff extended horizontally before him at eye level. Its lifeless metal was untarnished by the farrago of colors assaulting him, so he kept his gaze locked upon it, using its truth to filter out the lines. He had diffused his breathing to a low susurration, its exhalation extending across several minutes, yet encompassing no more than 11 heartbeats. His master had attained 7 beats in the ritual of the Arhat Kara, but Aun el Kiuhai knew he would never match such serenity. Nor would he ever ascend beyond his current station in the ethereal caste's hierarchy. That knowledge brought neither resentment nor sadness, for he had cast aside all desire save service to the Tauva. All else was as illusory as the storm that raged around him. And behind illusions prowled beasts. They came for him together, springing from the mist in perfect synchronicity, one from behind, the other from his left, which they had identified as his weaker side. Traditionally, their kind attacked in a cacophony of squawks and hoots, yet this pair came in silence, denying their prey any warning. "They are learning," Q-High approved. He spun to his left, thrusting his staff towards the dark shape flanking him, but it sprang away into the fog like a gangling acrobat. He felt a rush of air at his back as the other assailant's blade hacked through the space he had occupied a moment earlier. The ferocity of the swing committed the attacker for a second too long, shining it to the impotent arc as Q-High whirled his staff over his shoulder. It was a blind strike, but the displaced air had told him all he needed to know. When he entered the Arhat Kara, every monument stretched into many, and every whisper shouted. "Kavash!" he pronounced as his staff brushed his opponent's throat. Had the weapon blades been extended, it would have been a killing blow. Before his foe could offer the ritual response, the second beast lunged from the fog, its cranial quills erected with rage. Beady, deep-set eyes glared at him from either side of a proganthus serrated beak. The creature was naked save for a leather tabard, and its sinewy form was riddled with the tribal tattoos and precincts. This time, it didn't attack in silence. "Rook expects defeat," Q-High recognized as he swept his staff around to meet the Avian warrior's scimitar. "When Zelchuk falls, Rook always falls with her." The creature struck it in a whirlwind frenzy that would have overwhelmed the lesser foe, yet none of its blows passed the gliding, almost languid parries of Q-High's staff. To the Seeker, the onslaught was akin to an infant's tantrum, but he allowed it to run its course. Perhaps it will be instructive. Once again, anger's blind. Rook, Q-High gouged as he blocked. He was disappointed, but unsurprised, for they had played out this scene many times before. It was Zelchuk who ended the hopeless duel, bringing her bonded mate to heel with a derisory tirade of hoots and clicks. With a squawk of frustration, Rook threw his scimitar aside and proffered his neck. "Kovash!" Kyu said, gently tapping the creature's throat. "End simulation." The swirling fog vanished instantly, revealing the ochre-colored expanse of the firegrounds. The Whispering Hands training bay was divided into 6 sectors, some housing demi-sentient sparring machines, others devoted to low-tech challenges like climbing frames or ropes. Kyu Hai and his opponent stood in the simulation arena, where a large saucer-like machine hovered overhead, its underside bristling with sensors and projectors that tracked their movements. This late in the ship's sleep cycle, the bay was almost empty, yet Kyu Hai and his companions were not quite alone. A human was training on the far side of the bay. The big man who had led the expedition's second Gue Fesa supported him. Their paths had crossed here before while their fellow travelers slept, but they had never spoken. "Reflect upon this defeat," Kyu Hai told the Avian warriors. "Leave me." The pair inscribed the symbol of unity with their claws, then loped towards the climbing arena where they would continue training until he summoned it. Once they would have berated each other for their defeat, but they were past such foolishness. He had brought them that far at least. "Your honor guard is formidable, exalted one," the expedition's ranking fire warrior had observed when Kyu Hai had come aboard the ship. "The crew are fierce allies. I am a seeker, Shashel Akurio. I have no honor guard," Kyu Hai had replied. "Rook and Seljuk are simply companions on my path." Many of Kyu Hai's fellow Tau were repelled by the Avian auxiliaries, but he had detected only respect in the fire warrior's voice. Thu, Akurio, and he were of the same rank within their respective castes. The ethereals were elevated above all others, creating a gulf of authority between them. Had the Seeker commanded it, Akurio would have taken his own life without hesitation. Such blind faith had troubled Kyu Hai when he had first stepped onto his path. But he had soon learned that it was not blind at all, for his caste was the living embodiment of the Tau Va. "We rule to serve," he said, echoing the words of his former master. The sounds of combat drew him from his reflection. While his mind had wandered, his body had followed its own path, carrying him to the arena where the big Guela was dueling with a pair of drones. The saucer-like machines buzzed around the man, harassing him with low-intensity lasers as he whirled about, blocking their beams with a mirror shield strapped to his wrists. His only method of retaliation was to reflect the lasers back to their source, but only a direct hit on an emitter would disable a drone, while 3 strikes to his torso would end the bout. Judging by the tenacity, the machines had been set to maximum aggression, a challenge even for seasoned fire warriors. Though the man moved with a speed that belied his bulk, it was apparent that his ambition exceeded his ability. Like Rook, he fights in the expectation of defeat, Kyu Hai judged. He anticipated the Guerla would meet failure with a curse, but when it came, he simply said, "Start over." "Hold!" Kyu Hai interjected, and the drones froze. The Guerla turned surprised, then bowed his head. "I didn't mean to intrude," he fluttered, evidently unsure of the correct form of address. "Lord," he ventured. He spoke in a hoarse growl, as if his throat was damaged. "Seeker," Kyu Hai corrected. His sharp eyes scanned the identity disc on the man's tunic. "And the intrusion is mine, Vesawi Voyle. I am honored, Seeker." Even by the standards of his species, with their jutting snouts and curled ears, Voyle was ugly. Like all the expedition's Vesa, he was shaven-headed and his skin was stained blue to mirror his liberator's complexion, but such contrivances couldn't soften the brutish cast of his features. His eyes were set deep in a craggy, scar-crossed wasteland that terminated in a slab-like jaw. It was a strange canvas to bear the concentric rings of unity, yet also an eloquent one. For if such a damaged being could be redeemed, then surely there was hope for the rest of its species. To the seeker's mind, the Guela were infinitely more dangerous than honest savages like the Kroot, but equally, their potential was far greater. They are an ancient race, crooked with the malignancies of age, Kuihai's master Hatov, and yet the eons have not diminished their passions. In time, they will either become our most ardent allies or our most dire foes. You fought with skill, but chose your battle without wisdom, Kuihai said. To overextend oneself is to welcome defeat. I stand corrected, Seeker. My thoughts were clouded. Sleep evades you. I don't like what it brings, or where it takes me. The Moran rubbed at his neck and Kuihai spotted a pale scar under his jaw. It was circular, almost like another ring of unity. There are things I thought I was done with. Are you having doubts, you Versailles? Doubts? Voyle looked sharply, evidently surprised. No, no doubts. I want to see the Imperium burn, Seeker. That may not serve the greater good. Our mission here in the Damocles Gulf is peaceful. We may yet find common cause with the people of your Imperium. It's not my Imperium, Seeker, Voyle said, his expression hardening. It never was. There it is, Kuihai saw. The potential for terrible light and darkness. That is why awakened minds like yours must strive to reclaim it for the greater good, he said. Voyle didn't answer, but the denial in his eyes was apparent. He is correct, Kuihai reflected. His species yearns for strife. There will be no accord with their Imperium, and yet we must attempt it, even if it only delays the inevitable. This is an inopportune time for war. When it comes, it must be of our choosing, not the enemy's. A melodious sequence of chimes reverberated through the day, announcing the dawn cycle. We will talk again, Guevasui. Voyle, Kuihai said, studying the man's face. Think upon my words. As the seeker tore and strode toward the door, he felt the man's shadow-racked eyes following him. Review transmission 5-359. Por El Adib commanded. The data drone, embedded in the glassy table before her bulb and its dome erupted with a corona of pixels, illuminated the dimly lit conclave chamber where the embassy's leaders had gathered at her request. The iridescent particles flickered, then resolved into a diminutive figure floating above the drone in a rigid lotus position. The hololithic avatar's fine features and high-collared robes identified him as a member of the Tau water caste, like Abdib herself. I bear greetings in the name of the greater good, the avatar announced in a mellifluous baritone. I am Porvedalith Vaishal, first emissary of the 8th branch of the Whisper-Tide Concordance, entrusted with the enlightenment of the 19th parallel of the Damocles Gulf, designated the Yuke's assistant. Please forgive the excessive interval since my last communication, but my expedition has been beset by grievous travails, and many of my associates have passed into the deep silence. Yuxa is a troubled region where the dominion of the Guela Imperium has grown profoundly frayed. Such disorder is fertile soil for anarchy and violence, yet also for opportunity. For as the storm spawns ruin, so ruination foreshadows fresh hope. And in hope there is unity. You were never one for succinctness, Vaishal, Abdib reflected. Her colleague had always leaned towards the flamboyant, and not only in his rhetoric. It was why she had rejected his many proposals for a pairing, despite his comeliness. And also she suspected why she had advanced beyond him in their caste's hierarchy. Yet despite Faisal's limitations, his disappearance had saddened her. How like him to confound her assumptions and reappear, seemingly alive and well. Know that our sacrifice has not been without purpose, Faisal's image was saying, his narrow slits dilated with pride. Under my auspices, Yuxa's dominant Guela faction, the Illuministic order of the ever-turning cog, has embraced the greater good with formidable conviction. Though I have dedicated my life to the dissemination of the Tauva among the ignorant, I have never witnessed an ideological metamorphosis to rival the one that blossoms here. Indeed, I believe the key to the spiritual redemption of this vexatious species, perhaps even the unraveling of its barbaric imperium, may lie here in the Yuxa system. Regrettably, however, this efflorescence of reason is impaired by recidivist elements and technological impediments beyond my capacity to solve. My Guela associates have prepared a report of our predicament, and I have appended it to this transmission for your elucidation. Esteemed colleagues, I urge you to dispatch a relief mission to Yuxo without delay. It will be a betrayal of our exalted commission if this promising light were extinguished in its infancy. Spatial coordinates and supporting specifications follow. The hololith flickered out, and the light rose, revealing the others seated around the conclave table. Adib and Fiovre Daouk, the expedition's senior engineer, had already seen the recording, but for the pair of firewars it was the first time. The older one's weathered face wore his customary disapproval of all non-military matters. Even by the standards of her caste, Shazvre Bhoral was a dull creature, but doubtless she hadn't been chosen for her intellect. She was a tightly focused weapon, nothing more. It was the officer sitting beside her who muttered to Bidh. The recording is genuine, Shas El Akurio asked. It was encoded with ULA equipment, but the identity ciphers are correct, Bidh replied. Moreover, Porvre Faisal and I are former colleagues. It is certainly him. His manner is singular. Akurios bore forward slightly to indicate the irony that anticipates derision. For a fire warrior, he was unusually expressive, Abid thought. Even handsome in a coarse way. More importantly, he was perceptive. His Gu Vesad troops, to whom he was nothing less than a hero, had named him Stormlight for his stalwart guidance in both war and peace. How long has this emissary been missing? Akurio asked. Prior to this transmission, our last contact with Faisal's embassy was almost 3 spatial years ago, Adib said. They were presumed lost, and the Yuxa system was designated non-viable. The matter was not investigated. As you are aware, the Whispertide Concordance is only an exploratory venture into the Damocles Gulf, a bridgehead to the Guela. Our resources are limited. His sudden reappearance troubles me, Akurio said, cutting to the roots of the matter. Naturally. This is why you are here, Shas-El. Why have I been allowed only Brohal and 2 UEVSA support teams to protect you, poor El? It was the High Ambassador's degree. Adib extended her hands palms upward. We walk the path of the open hand. An excessive military presence might be misconstrued, and opportunities of the kind Faisal describes cannot be squandered. Then you believe his story. That is for a revered seeker to determine, Adib said. My purpose is to facilitate a fruitful discourse. And yours is to watch over us, Stormlight, a quiet voice said behind her. I have no doubt you will both perform your duties admirably. Adib turned and saw the seeker standing in the entrance of the conclave chamber, his arms crossed in a posture of tranquil authority. He was attired in plain grey robes, cinched at the waist by a black shas. As always, a deep cowl pulled his features in shadow, obscuring his eyes. His hunter staff was clipped to a simple harness on his back. How long has he been there? Adib wondered, as a thrill of devotion surged through her. It was rumored that seekers could pass and sing among the other castes, and Kiwi-Hai had done nothing to dispel that notion. Formerly known as Yasu Aun, the finders of the truth at heights. Seekers were solitary mystics who wandered the Tau Empire, following paths only the ethereal caste could comprehend. Sometimes they would attach themselves to an expedition, appearing unexpectedly, but always welcome, for their presence was a great honor. Though Adib was officially still the mission's leader, the reality of that had changed the moment Kiwi Hai had joined them. Yet she felt no acrimony towards him. In her most introspective moments, the equanimity sometimes troubled her, but the unease will never crystallize. We shall not fail you, Seeker, Akurio vowed, clearly as awed by the mystic as Adib. Nor are you, Stormlight, Kui Hai replied. He turned to Adib. Porel, when we reach Yuxa, you will conduct our negotiations. Under your auspices, of course, Seeker. You misunderstand, Porel. You will lead the embassy alone. I will observe unobserved. The seeing eye seeks further. Then you suspect a trap, Seeker? Akurio asked intently. That is my path. When the next sleep cycle came around, Voyle climbed into a serenity cell. The last thing he saw as the hatch slid shut was Erzul watching him from the cubicle in the opposite wall. Fighting down his nausea, Voyle extinguished the night. It's nothing, he whispered. But it didn't feel like nothing. Not at all. His heart was pounding as the memory surged up with almost physical force, darkness, and the stench of stale promethium. Then he is inside the other coffin again. The empty fuel silo he had crawled into and welded shut with Hoening's last cutter. His ear is pressed against the sleek metal, listening for the abominations that have slaughtered the boarding party. Hoening is slumped against him in the tight space, his breath coming in ragged, bubbling gasps as he bleeds out. The specialist trooper's left arm has been torn off at the shoulder, along with most of his face, yet oblivion eludes him. His surviving eye roves about as if seeking answers to questions he cannot understand, let alone ask. Voyle knows he should give his comrade mercy, but then he will be the last of them and he isn't ready for that yet. I can't, he says. Hoening's questing eyes fixes upon him, mutely condemning the darkness to black. Face your fear, or it will consume you. Voyle recoils and slips further into the darkness, into the nightmare, back to the moment when it truly begins. Proceed, Kui Hai commands. Subject Voyle Ulver, species Guella, male. The data drone answering in its sexless, perfectly modulated voice. Age 36 biological years. Height. Omit somatic data. Q interrupted. Proceed to biographic. Yes, Seeker, the drone replied. Former Astra Militarium Trooper, 11th Exordio, Void Breachers. Alone in the conclave chamber, Q High listened as the drone related Voile's history. He didn't know what he was looking for, but he was certain he would recognize it when he found it. In time, that recognition would blossom into understanding, but it was an ambiguous process driven by intuition rather than intellect. A seeker perceived connections and anomalous elements, be they events, objects, or individuals. As an artist of the water caste perceived the rhythm of colors, words, or melodies. Like that artist, Kui Hai's calling was to create harmony, but his canvas was spiritual rather than aesthetic. Subject Voyle was subsequently promoted to the rank of bridge sergeant and assigned to patrol duties along the perimeter of the Damocles Gulf, the data drone was saying. His first tour, his eyes closed, an arm folded. Kiwi Hai let the story wash over him. Thus far, nothing in Voile's service record has struck the discordant note he was waiting for. The man's career was competent but unexceptional, grey. Yet something had drawn him to Voyle, just as it had drawn him to this mission when so many others had vied for his attention. Who are you, Voyle? Guilherme mused. Why do you matter? The Voyle has fallen. Only minutes further into the nightmare's path, it is enough to resurrect his comrades and a delusion of order. The squad has traveled far in search of the dead ship's bridge, for if there are any answers to be found, they will surely be there. Unexpectedly, the derelict is still pressurized. Through its atmosphere is stale, and none of the troopers have opened their visors. They don't trust this place enough to taste the air. How much further, Hoining, Voyle hears himself ask. Whole again. The specialist trooper consults his scanner. The glowing map on its readout is only an approximation of the hulk's layout derived from similar vessels. But Hoynin has a talent for navigating on the fly. Another deck up, Bridge Sergeant, he replies. Should be an access ladder there, or 4 junctions ahead. But Voyle, both past and present, isn't listening anymore. Did something move in the intersecting corridor he just passed? He steps back and illuminates the passageway. Its length is choked with a snarl of pipes and corroded machinery that spin strange shadows from his light. That conscripted abattoir of junk isn't somewhere he wants to go, but he has to be certain. So he steps into its maws. Don't! Voyle, present, yells silently into his past. With a wet hiss, a pile of debris uncoils before him, extending long arms that end in hook-like talons. A moment later, a second pair unfurls beneath the first, but these taper into long-fingered hands that look almost delicate. The creature's gangling form is sheathed in chitinous blue plates that bulge into a carapace of bones over its chest and shoulders. Through its posture is hunched, its bestial head is level with Voile's own. So close, he can see its mouth flesh pulsating. It was waiting for me, he understands. Voile's melta gun is trained on the thing's ribcage, but his trigger finger has turned to stone, along with his legs and throat, all held rigid by its gaze. Its eyes are a lustreless black, yet the hunger in them is unmistakable, unassailable, even beautiful in its purity. Now one of Voile's hands moves, rising to the sill of his visor. He gaps as the derelict's freezing air hits him, but it is not enough to snap him free of those mesmerizing eyes. Bruce Sergeant! Someone calls behind him as the creature's jaws distend. An irrigate tongue extrudes, dripping viscous ichor. The organ is thorn-tipped and pregnant with promise. Burn it! Voyle bellows at himself as he raises his head and over his throat. Perhaps his warning rents time, space, and logic to steer his formal self to action. Perhaps it is nothing more than a shock reflex. Either way, when the beast's tongue pierces his flesh, he squeezes the trigger. As cold corruption courses into his bloodstream, a blast of purifying heat incinerates the thing's torso. Its tongue is wrenched free as it falls, but Voyle feels no pain through the numbness in his neck. He snaps his visor shut as gunfire erupts in the corridor behind him. Xenos! Somebody shouts. In the pandemonium that follows the first attack, Voyle can tell how many of the abominations there are. But within seconds, his squad is fighting for its life as the things assail it from all sides. Soon, 3 troopers are lost, and the fight has become flight. Reaching the sanctuary of the Sable Star is the only hope, but the route has transformed the corridors into a maze, and Hoyning's cannon has been lost along with the arm that carried it. Voyle yields his heavy gun one-handed as he supports the wounded men. They are both drenched in the blood pumping from the raw stump of Hoyning's shoulder, yet the specialist is still conscious. Still their best chance of finding a way out. The 7 survivors become 6, then 5, then only 4 as the claws young troopers into dark recesses or the pipes above. Sable Star! Voyle shouts into his helmet box, but the only reply is a hiss of static. The squad left a string of coma relays in its wake to maintain contact with the ship, but the route has carried them far from that path. Take right, Hoyning gasps as they reach another junction. Audibly, the Vogue crackles into life. Status Squad Indigo. I repeat. Lieutenant, Voyle interrupts. We are under attack, taking heavy casualties. Confirmed, the acting commander replies. What are you up against, Bridge Sergeant? Unknown Xenos. Don't know how many. We need a support team now. There is a long pause. I am disengaging the umbilical. Wait! I can't allow the Sable Star to be compromised. Lieutenant Jolife's voice is walking a knife edge of panic now. Listen to me. We're Emperor protect you, Bridge Sergeant. The Vox goes dead. Voyle courses him as the trooper ahead is pulled through the floor by something unseen. He sends an incinerating blast into the torn ground as he steps past, virtually dragging Hoyning now. Moments later, a plunged metallic scrapping echoes through the corridor. Every void breacher knows that sound. That was the umbilical, Thurston yells from somewhere behind. We were almost there, Voyle realizes bitterly. Keep moving, he orders as he staggers on, going nowhere now, but too angry to stop. Soon Thurston is also gone, and only Voyle and the wounded specialist remain. Hoyning has passed out, but he's still breathing and Voyle won't leave him behind, even if it makes no difference anymore. As he wanders the labyrinth, he senses the black-eyed Xenos watching him from the shadows. Inexplicably reticent now, his comrades are dead. Are they toying with him? No. Voyle is strangely certain that cruelty isn't in their nature. Stranger still, he can't bring himself to hate them. Whatever else they are, the creatures are honest in their desires. The beauty he glimpsed in his first encounter was not entirely false. Beside, he has no hatred left to spare for them. We were so close, he rasps, thinking of Joliffe. Dimly he recalls breach of protocol, even recognizes that the lieutenant was right. But rage drowns such reasonable nonsense. So damn close. The corridors reverberate with a deep, distant pounding, and Voyle realizes the Sable Star has opened fire on the dead ship. He doubts its depleted weapons can destroy the colossal vessel, but the outer sections will certainly be depressurized. Even if the ship survives, he might not. I'm dead anyway, Voyle hisses, but his body denies it, and suddenly, fiercely, he realizes he wants to keep it that way. His fury demands it. That and something colder. Shortly afterwards, he finds the fuel silos. 5 spatial years ago, subject Voyle was recovered from an abandoned vessel found in the ninth Damocles parallel, the data drone said. The report specifies he had been adrift for 3 months following an encounter with hostile life forms of an unknown nature. No trace of these aggressors was found. However, evidence. Kui was listening intently now. According to the report, Voyle had displayed remarkable resilience, both physical and mental, in the face of his ordeal. On site, examination concluded that "Halt!" Kui said sharply. "Repeat previous segment." Voyle clawed his way out of the nightmare like a panicked corpse from its grave. But the taste of rotten flesh in his mouth wasn't his own. He had finally remembered that last worst part of the horror, the part his liberators had suppressed during his induction. Only they weren't liberators at all, not for him. How could they be when he was knee-deep in damnation? God, deep. It was evident that the subject had sustained himself by cannibalizing a dead comrade, the drone repeated. Cannibalism, Kui thought. The practice was not unknown among some species. Indeed, it was revered by the crude. But among the Guilherme it was regarded as extremely deviant behavior. The matter was not noted as a cause for concern, he asked. The presiding ethereal, Aunvre Tokovo, deemed it within acceptable parameters of Guilherme degeneracy. Proceed, Kui said, suppressing a rare flicker of irritation. Even among his own caste, there were too many who dismissed the Guilherme as primitives. Following screening and remedial therapy, the subject was inducted into the Kirkath Auxiliary Academy on Sasea Sept, where he demonstrated exceptional aptitude aligned with the robust commitment to the Ta'uvar. His initial posting, 5 years of faultless service to the greater good followed, with Voyle fighting on various battlegrounds at the fringes of the empire. The seeker listened to it all, so he was certain he had already found the key to Voile's anomaly. Now he had to make sense of it and decide whether Ulver Voyle was an asset or liability. No, Voyle rasped over and over, but no matter how often he repeated it, the truth would not be denied. No, no! As the days of his confinement had stretched into untold weeks, his soul had narrowed towards nothingness. Starved of hope for retribution, even his rage had dimmed, yet his body had fought on. Somewhere blood deep, much deeper than he could see, it had been unwilling to die. When his suit's rations were exhausted, he'd scavenged from the corpse behind him in the silo. And then when its supplies were also gone, Voyle retched and slammed a fist against his sleeping cell. What am I? He snarled into the darkness within. And for the first time, the darkness answered. But its voice came from without. The second circle, threshold. The Yuxa system had 11 planets, but only 2 harbored life. Phaedra, a fungus-infested waterworld, and Skitalis, a bloated gas giant whose outer layers hung with phantasmal aeriform vermin. It was to the second of these that the Whispering Hand was bound, though its destination was not the planet itself, but the lesser Leviathan suspended in its anahemic exosphere. From a distance, the structure appeared to be a dark blemish against Skitty Alice ochre and russet swill. But as the vessel drew closer, the moat grew spiny and misshapen, like a tumor in metastasis. Closer still, it resolved into a sprawl of interconnected metal modules of varying size and shape. A monolithic spindle rose from the center of the tangle, towering over the other structures and trailing titanic extraction pipes into the world below. The spindle's cog-like tears skimmered with lights as they resolved. But further from the center, the expanse grew dark, and the domes of its component modules were cracked open to the void, as though they had been rocked by some terrible violence. Though the spore pearl was artificial, it was still a cancer, for its growth had long ago become rampant and perverse, twisted out of any semblance of order by the countless masters who had presided over it. Most had become their stewardship in sobriety, but few had ended that way, for despite the intent of its architects, discord ran deep in this place. Whether it was the influence of the baleful giant it leached upon, or the consequence of some intrinsic flaw, the sky hive was tainted, its history saturated in strife. And yet it had endured across millennia, gradually paying its tithes to the Imperium and never quite embracing a heresy that would have invited retaliation. There were myriad such cancers growing in the cracks of the Imperium, but few as furtive. The place had acquired many names, some truer than others. Its formal designation was Scitalis Altus, but its current masters had ennobled it as the Unfolding Nexus. However, to the millions who eked out a living in its corroded avenues, it was simply called the Rat's Cradle. I do not like it, poor El Adib decided. Not at all. The sky hive rotated slowly above the conclave table. Its tangled lineaments reproduced imperfect holographic fidelity. Its presence felt like a taint upon the room, upon her. Taint. A bit dismissed the notion. Such irrationality had corroded the collective psyche of the Guela. It had no place in the thinking of a Tau. Your thoughts, Shah-El, she asked. It is dangerous, Akurio replied. He stood on the opposite side of the table, his form distorted by the hologram. I concur, Adib said. Yet we must proceed with the mission. They were alone in the conclave chamber. Her first impression of the fire warrior had proved correct, and over the passing days she had come to value his counsel, even to regard him as a friend. After the artifice of the whisper-dyed Congress, his directness was bracing. Why? Akurio asked. Why are we taking this risk, Borel? The true reason. Because the High Ambassador has decreed it, she replied. The Yuxa system interests him. She raised a hand to stem his next question. I do not know why. Poor old Seishin keeps his own counsel, but we must trust his judgment. He is young, Akurio said flatly. He is gifted, Adib corrected, thinking of her idealistic-driven superior. Exceptionally so. The Empire recognizes and rewards talent. Akurio was silent for a moment, brooding. It is fortunate that a seeker walks beside us on this path, he said finally. We are due to dock in 9 hours. I must go, Porel. Why Poral? Abik asked as she turned to go. I do not understand. Why did you choose Shasfre Boral as your aide? The question had nagged at her for some time. At first she had assumed the warriors were old comrades, perhaps even Talisera bonded. But she had seen no warmth between them. Indeed, Akurio seemed closer to his Guevesa than to his fellow fire warrior. I did not choose her, he said stiffly. She was assigned to me for the mission. Adib wanted to ask, but that was absurd. Thank you, Shashel, she said instead. See to your troops. When he was gone, she returned her attention to the hologram. She wasn't sure why she had asked the question or why Akuria's answer troubled her. In fact, the closer they drew to their objective, the less certain she was of anything. Alone in the darkness of his serenity cell, Ulver Voyle listened to the voice. It had grown stronger over the past few days, swelling from a subliminal murmur to an evanescent whispering. Yet its words still eluded him. What are you trying to tell me? He hissed. The third circle. Inside. Poor El, Adib's nostril slits dilated with disgust as she stepped onto the ship's disembarkation ramp, and the acid stench of the sky hive hit her. She imagined a broken machine licking the black sludge that powered so much of the Imperium's technology. Quelling her nausea, she studied the immense expanse of the hangar bay as she descended, her data drone hovering above her head like a domed halo. The wall of the cavernous chamber were corroded and slick with filth, its floor knotted with trailing types and discarded tools. Dozens of subhuman laborers toiled among the labyrinth of machinery, their bodies crudely fused to metal limbs, their eyes as vacant as their minds. It had always puzzled Adib that the Imperium embraced such atrocities while condemning the elegant drones of the Tau Empire. So much of their suffering is self-inflicted, she mused. Noteworthy, Fiovre Dauk declared beside her. Adib didn't know whether the stocky engineer was referring to the order of some obscure detail only he could see, but she had learned not to inquire after such remarks. Dauk's concept of noteworthy rarely converged with anyone's else. He had found much of note during their approach to the hive, while Adib had seen only decrepitude. Why had Faisal led them to this floating sewer city? A courier and another armored figure were waiting for her at the foot of the ramp. They had donned their helmets so their faces were hidden behind flat sensor-studded visors that gave them an impassive machine-like aspect. A courier's mottled crimson armor bore a 5-armed sunburst on his breastplate, personal colors and heraldry granted to him when he had earned his rank. In contrast, his companion's uniform was the stark anodrone white of the whisper-tight concordance. Your QFSA understand there is to be no violence, Shashel, Adib asked, indicating the human soldiers lined up on either side of the ramp. Both the support teams were present, the troops' rifles slung over their shoulders as they crouched in the stance of watchful repose. They wore lighter variants of the Fire Warrior's armor, retaining the breastplates and shoulder pads, but lacking the contoured plates that sheathed their superiors' limbs. Their helmets were fitted with tainted lenses that covered their eyes but left their face bare. The Stormlit know their duty, a courier replied, referring to his troops as an extension of himself. It was a great honor, and several of the Gyuvesa puffed out their chests at his words. I have faith in your faith, Adib acknowledged, then appraised the warrior beside a courier. The deception was flawless. Despite the armor and helmet, she had expected to feel something, but all she said was what her eyes told her. This was just another fire warrior. It was as if the secret had somehow consecrated his spirit when he had donned the armor. It has become what he seems to be, she thought. There was a pneumatic hiss as the hangar's hatch split down the center and retracted to either side, spilling bright light into the chamber. And so we begin, Adib murmured as a robed figure entered. His vision enhanced by the sensors of his borrowed helmet, Q High started a new newcomer as it approached. Though it was swathed in a hooded purple mantle, there were subtle qualities of posture and gait that spoke of volumes to his refined sensibilities. Poor vrai, Faisal, Abdi declared when the stranger stopped before them. She saw it too, Kuihai realized, impressed. Few outside the ethereal caste were so perceptive. You know me too well, old friend, the newcomer said, pushing back his hood to reveal the familiar face of the missing emissary. He smiled and stretched out his arms to encompass the others. On behalf of the Order of the Ever-Turning Cog, I offer you welcome to the unfolding Nexus, a newborn engine of reason among the benighted Guela. Kuihai was perplexed. On the hololith, Faisal had appeared pompous, superficial even, but in person he was almost electric, as though an avid vitality burned within him. It has been too many years since we last conversed, pour vrai Adib. The emissary continued warmly, turning back to Adib. Pour elle, she corrected. I was elevated shortly after your disappearance. My apologies, poor El. Faisal bowed his head. It pleases me that your talents have been recognized. Smoothly, he reached out and grasped her hands. It was a brazen gesture that breached all etiquette, and Adib stiffened visibly. I have so much to share with you, Faisal said, his eyes bright. This Guela relic harbors many wonders that may advance the greater good. You came alone, emissary? Akurio asked bluntly. Faisal turned to the fire warrior, his smile unwavering. No, but we thought it best that you were greeted by one who is known to you. But I do not know you. Akurio indicated the iron talisman hanging from the emissary's neck. A four-toothed conch embossed with a double loop of infinity. Nor do I recognize the sect you now speak for. I bear the cog internal as a mark of respect, Faisal said. His smile remained, but the warmth had slipped from his eyes. Your message indicated urgency, pour vrai, Adib interjected, excrete in her hands. I would like to meet this remarkable Guela you have uncovered. Of course, pour elle. Faisal's gaze swept over the party. Your embassy was not accompanied by an exalted one. Unfortunately, there are few, and the needs of the empire many, Adib replied. Kuihai studied Faisal's face, expecting relief or disappointed. But there was nothing. We cannot read him, he realized. How can that be? On impulse, he glanced at the Guevesa troops searching for Voyle. The big man stood at the front of his team, his expression distant, as if his attention was elsewhere. Though they had talked occasionally during the remainder of the voyage, Kuihai was no closer to deciphering the man's significance. And yet he did not doubt it.
French is a myth perpetuated by those who only see what seems to be,
Kuihai's master had told him.
A seeker looks beneath the lies and finds the lines that bind. And where they have become twisted or frayed, he follows. For his path is to mend when he can, or excise when he cannot.
It was the first axiom of the Yasu Kaor, a philosophy by which a seeker served the greater good.
My path has led me through,
Kuihai judged, returning his attention to Faisal's smiling empty face.
Nothing is what it seems here. Support Team 1. The ship is under your watch. Be vigilant,
Akurio commanded as he strode towards the hangar doors.
Team 2, with me.
Voyle shook his head, trying to break free of the voice that haunted him. You Vesayu, someone said behind him. He stared and stared at the expectant faces of... Who were they? Voyle, the Shashel calls us, a hatchet-faced woman snapped. Ersul, he remembered, and the rest followed.
Move out,
he ordered.
Go! Am I losing my mind?
Voyle wondered as he followed his squad. Somehow the prospect troubled him less than any of the alternatives he could imagine. 3 vehicles waited outside the spaceport. 2 were open-top trucks, the third a massive armored car emblazoned with the sigil of the ever-turning cog. A group of robed figures watched over them, their long-barreled rifles leveled at the surrounding buildings. More were stationed along the segmented wall that encircled the spaceport like a metal serpent. Floodlights illuminated the perimeter, but beyond their reach, everything was swathed in gloom. Voyle looked up and counted less than a dozen lights in the iron sky of the dome. He knew each was a vast, burning globe, but it would take hundreds to illuminate a city-sized territory like this one.
This whole region is dying,
he guessed, remembering the many dark modules he'd seen from space. As the party approached the vehicles, Voyle saw the guards' purple robes were embroidered with the concentric rings of unity, but the bronze masks they wore under their hoods were less reassuring, for they were fashioned to resemble something more insect than human, with jutting compound jaws and bulbous multi-faced lenses.
Watchmen of the second rotation, the Tau emissary explained. They are here for your protection. Protection from what? The Stormlight demanded. Regrettably, the Order's enlightenment is not entirely unopposed. A few dissident factions remain active in the outer districts, but they are as incoherent as they are ignorant, Faisal said dismissively. The spaceport is under the Order's jurisdiction. But to reach the Alpha Axis, we must traverse a troubled region. I advise against proceeding, Torel, the Stormlight warned a bit. Let their leaders meet us here. With a whir of gyros, one of the guards marched towards them, its footsteps reverberating under its weight. It was tall and more powerfully built than its fellows, its chest encased in a slab-like breastplate. In place of a hood, it wore a back-swept helmet with a vertical slit visor that pulsed with blue light. An augmenting arm extended from its right shoulder, dwarfing the link below, and terminated in a 3-fingered claw. Alongside that monstrous appendage, the watchman's ornate rifle looked almost delicate. My designation is I.O. Alpha, Warden Prime, the warrior said in a pristine but lifeless female voice. Your security is my primary directive. Please board the transport. It rapped a gauntlet against its breastplate. For the greatest good. There is no cause of concern, Faisal urged. The warden is the Order's preeminent guardian. Be advised that I have made provisions for our safety, Abik warned him. My ship expects to receive a coded data blast from my drone every hour. Any breach of this will be construed as a hostile act. I am familiar with first contract protocol, Faisal said gently. But this is not a first contract, I assure you. The Order's offer of friendship is sincere. As is the Empire's, Adib parried. But the open hand must be firm of grip. You will respect my precautions, pour vrai. Naturally, Porel, Faisal bowed. Adig turned to a courier. We will proceed. The UFSR climbed into the back of a truck while Faisal ushered the Tau into the armored car. The watchman boarded the second truck, lining up along its sides in regimented ranks with a warden at their center. Voyle gripped the guardrail as his vehicle surged forward and took its place at the rear of the convoy, with the other truck leading and the car shielded between them. Once they were underway, his troops began to talk, eager to weigh up their strange host, but he silenced them. Stay sharp, he ordered, unslunging his pulse rifle. Trust nothing. How far? A courier asked. He hadn't removed his helmet, and his sensors glowed in the dingy cabin of the armored car. Adib suspected he would have preferred to travel with his troops, but was unwilling to leave her side. The access is 5 zones distance, a journey of many hours, Faisal answered from the seat opposite them. Regrettably,
Our only functioning port is on the hive's outskirts. That is one of the limitations we hope to rectify with your aid. Fehervari Dauk will make a full assessment of your requirements, Adib said, keeping her tone neutral.
My team stands ready to assist you.
Dauk concurred earnestly, though his eyes didn't leave the car's window slit. Doubtless he saw much of note outside.
I predict there is considerable work ahead of us. The Order's resources will be placed at your disposal, honored Fehervari,
Faisal promised.
Together we shall achieve great things.
Assuming we reach an accord, Adib cautioned, sounding querulous even to herself. In the crowd cabin, Faisal's presence was almost overpowering.
We shall, Porre. When we reach the access, you will understand everything.
Faisal smiled, and Adib felt a rush of unwelcome affection for him. No, it was simpler than that, more primal. How he has changed, she mused. He looks younger than he... Bright light flashed into her face, breaking the fascination. Audibly, Faisal was gone, and a hollowed-out predatory thing sat in his place, appraising her with hungry eyes.
Forgive me, Porel,
the seeker said from the seat beside the apparition. He extinguished his helmet light, and with it the horror.
I fear my helm has developed an error.
See that you correct it, fire warrior, Adib replied, surprised that her terror hadn't reached her voice. Perhaps it was because shame eclipsed the fear. The seeker had seen her desire. No, that desire was not mine, she thought angrily, willing Kui Hai to see that.
Are you well, my friend?
Faisal asked, his face furrowed with concern. Perfectly well, Adib said. It was the most profound lie she had ever told. The twilight district passed in a blur of crooked tenements, their growth stunted by the confines of the iron sky. Some had been reduced to scorched husks, while others had collapsed into rubble. Citizens hunted the squalor around open fires, like flesh-bound ghosts, either alone or in small groups. All were emaciated and grey, their bodies as wasted as their world. Most ignored the convoy, but a few watched it pass with empty eyes. Sometimes squads of purple-robed watchmen moved among them, their weapons swiveling about as they patrolled. Once the vehicle swerved around a towering bipedal automaton with a warrior sitting astride it. The machine stomped through the streets, rocking back and forth to its own graceless rhythm as its searchlight scoured the hovels.
This is a war zone, Voyle judged, or the tail end of one. Occupied territory.
They had been traveling for almost an hour when the road narrowed and carried them into a stretch of gutted manufactories. The vehicle slowed to a halt and Voyle heard a clamor from somewhere up ahead, presumably the watchman disembarking.
Azul, take a look,
he ordered. The Pathfinder nodded and clambered into the truck's cabin. Something is on the road ahead, she said. Looks like another truck. But she threw herself flat as a barrage of gunfire erupted from the ruins to the right. One of the Guevesa snapped backwards and fell as a bullet punched into his face. Another ricocheted off Voile's helmet.
Stay low and return fire,
Voyle shouted, ducking as the bullets battered his vehicle's sides. There was a chorus of electronic chimes as his troops activated their pulse rifles, followed by the sibilant whine of plasma bolts when they opened fire. Voyle raised his head and scanned the ruins through his rifle's scope, moving about until he locked into a figure lurking behind a broken window. His weapon pinged as he increased the magnification and drew his target into sharper focus. It was a man in a ragged grey fatigues, his head protected by a rusty iron helmet painted with a stylized M. An archaic rebreather mask covered his mouth, its tube sneaking over his shoulders into a bulky backpack. Above the mask, his eyes were bloodshot wounds in a pallid face riddled with scars and sores. He appeared to be in the terminal stages of some flesh-eating pestilence, yet he stood straight, unbowed by his bulky stabber gun.
This lot looks worse than ours,
Voyle decided sourly, lining up on the attacker's face. Before he could fire, there was a voltaic crackle, and a streak of light flayed his mark like an electric whip. The man convulsed as current played about him, igniting his clothes and charring his flesh. Voyle turned and saw the warden marching across the building's rubble-strewn courtyard, with her watchmen following in a wider arc. Venting an electronic ululation, she seized a chunk of debris with her claws and hurled it at the crouching enemy. Simultaneously, her rifle's glassy barrel glowed blue and spat another jagged bolt into the ruins. Without slowing their stride, her troops fired a volley of explosive rounds in perfect synchronicity, every buffet finding a different foe.
"They're fighting us one,"
Voyle murmured, studying their lethal combat symmetry. He felt calm now, as if the skirmish had elevated him above his private damnation. The voice was still there, oozing around the battlefield like an auricular spirit of war, but it almost made sense now.
"Can they hear it too?"
Voyle wondered hazily as he slipped into harmony with the orders and forces, becoming another cog in a precision-killing machine, aiming and firing and executing the raiders without hesitation. Bullets exploded around the advancing watchmen, frequently tearing through their robes and ricocheting off the armor beneath. The warden appeared imprevious, but occasionally one of her cohorts will jerk or stumble as a bullet penetrated its armor. One fell to its knee with a shattered leg, but continued to fire as its comrades marched on. Another took a round in the throat and toppled over.
"They don't lack courage,"
one of the UFSI yelled.
"Maybe,"
Voyle thought, stirring from his combat reverie.
"Or maybe they just don't know any better. No heroics," he cautioned. This isn't our fight."
"They don't need us anyway," he gorged. The ambush was already fluttering under the warden's counterattack. Whoever the raiders or rebels were, they were woefully outclassed by the order's troops, but they were fighting to the bitter end.
This wasn't a chance attack. The poor bastards threw everything they had at it. Why?
As the warden reached the building, a raider threw a grenade from the window above. She seared him with lightning and lashed out with her claw, snatching the grenade from the air and hurling it back, but it detonated a few meters above her. She staggered under the concussion, her augmetic arm whipping about as she fought for balance.
What?
Voile's rifle pinged repeatedly as he zoomed in on her whirling ribs. The explosion had torn away a patch of its arm, revealing not raw machinery, but what looked like more plating. Though it was rounded and dark blue in color, almost organic.
Like insect shitting.
Voyle froze, staring down his scope as the wanderer recovered and stopped into the building, leaving him zoomed in on nothing but memories.
Void black eyes, holding him transfixed as the predator uncalls to appraise him.
Status report 2, his helmet communicator hissed. The Stormlight.
One you ever saw dead, one lightly wounded.
Voyle answered automatically.
Situation under control, Chassel.
Acknowledged.
2. Hold your positions.
As the last of the watchmen entered the building, Voyle made up his mind.
Cover me,
he ordered his squad and vaulted from the truck, keeping his eyes on the injured watchman who'd been left behind his predator's fallen comrade. The warrior lay flat on its face, motionless.
What do you expect to find?
Voyle asked himself as he knelt by the body.
A cold and thirsty poison, awakening his blood and watching the world through his eyes.
He heaved the warrior into its back, and a third arm slid free from the ropes. Like the warden's augmetic, it was encased in segmented iron plates, but it ended in scythe-like blade that was unmistakably bone.
Mutants!
Voyle spat, feeling his gorge rise. He appraised the gaping wound in the warrior's throat. A large caliber round had torn right through it, almost decapitating the creature. Nothing human could have survived such trauma. But did that mean anything here? As he reached for its mask, the subterranean squeal of the verse surged into sudden clarity. No. Voyle froze. That denial was the first meaningful word it had heard. It had said to him. Perhaps even the first time it had been truly aware of him. "You were never talking to me, were you?" Voyle whispered, following a tenebrous intuition. "I was only ever listening in." No. The prohibition was more forceful now, yet it held no sway over him. "What don't you want me to see?" Voyle challenged. "Why?" A bullet drilled into the ground by his feet. He turned and saw the kneeling watchman had leveled his rifle at him. "They're yours, aren't they?" Voyle said to the voice. "All of them. Go now." It breathed. Now it had the key to his head. It was learning fast. Did that mean it would start pulling his strings too? No. Voyle snarled back and activated his helmet's transmitter. "Azul, wounded watchman to my right. Take it out!" A bright blot lanced across the courtyard and erased the warrior's head in a burst of plasma. She didn't hesitate, Voyle thought with grim satisfaction. I might be losing my mind, but my squad still trusts me. Ignoring the voice, he pulled the dead watchman's mask aside and froze, watching and waiting for the moment when he can claim another to feed the hunger that can never be sated. Voyle switched his transmitter to the squad-wide channel. "Seize the vehicle," he ordered. "The watchmen are hostile. Take them down." He looked up and saw the warden emerging from the building, doubtless summoned by her unseen master. Her helmet swung about, its visor slit pulsing with blue light as she scanned the battleground. "What's under there?" Voyle wondered, glancing back at the corpse. Its face was a travesty of humanity, with deeply recessed eyes and rubbery mauve-hued skin. A chitinous ridge ran from its forehead to the bridge of its nose, beneath which its face erupted into a nest of pink tendrils. Many of them were still twitching, as if animated by a life of their own. The voice was gnawing at Voile's mind now, but he shut it out, sensing that every word it spoke would sink another root into his soul, like one of the corpse's undying tendrils. "I'm not yours," he rasped as the UFSR opened fire on the watchman. "Seize the vehicles!" Voile's voice hissed inside Kiuhai's helmet. The Seeker acted without conscious thought, moving before the command had even concluded. The tone of Voile's first word was enough to tell him that the wheel of possibilities had turned, carrying them from diplomacy to conflict. The cause and consequences could be assessed later. For now, only action mattered. "Don't be alarmed," Faisal was saying beside him, responding to the muffled sounds of battle. The watchman will QI's armored elbow slammed into the side of his head. As the emissary slumped over, the Seeker leapt up and surged towards the driver. The man turned, and QI's fist hammered between his eyes, throwing him against the wheel with stunning force. Faisal had called the pale, hairless creature a timekeeper of the fourth rotation. Had he been one of the armored warriors, Kuihai wouldn't have risked holding back, but for now, killing was best avoided. "The watchmen are hostile," Voile's warning continued as Kuihai hauled the unconscious driver from his seat and took his place. "Take them down." "What is happening, Seeker?" Adib asked, shocked in the sudden violence. "We are betrayed," Akurio answered flatly, activating his pulse rifle. He had also heard the message, but his reaction had inevitably trailed behind Kiwihai's.
Say to your men, Stormlight,
the seeker commanded, assessing the controls. The car appeared to be standard Voyle technology, rudimentary but robust.
we must return to the ship immediately. Understood.
Akurio opened the hatch and leaped out, slamming it closed behind him. How may I serve? Adib asked. Once again, Kuihai was impressed with her. She had adjusted quickly.
Search the emissary for weapons, then alert the ship, Voyle,
He said.
The status code is Malkaor. Fiovre, see to the driver.
Yes, how in hell they chose.
What have you done, Voyle?
Kuihai wondered as he ganged the engine into life. Voyle raced for the vehicles, weaving between piles of rubble as plasma bolts swept overhead and solid rounds exploded around him. Sometimes a whiplash of electricity cracked past, but he sensed that the warden was only trying to slow him.
You want me alive?
Voyle muttered behind his breath, addressing the voice.
You want to know how I work, or why I don't?
Up ahead, both the armored car and the rearmost truck had begun to reverse along the road. Erzul and two other Gue Vesa crouched in the truck's back, exchanging fire with the watchmen. Unlike the raiders' antiquated guns, their pulse rifles punched through the mutants' armor with ease, forcing them to stay in cover or die. Even the tank-like warden had retreated behind a wall. Suddenly, Voyle felt a ferocious pride in his Xenos liberators. In a galaxy drowning in corruption, they were surely the best, perhaps the only hope.
Juevesoi, be swift,
the Stormlight transmitted. Voyle saw Akurio leading the rest of his team against the lead truck. The warden had left a pair of watchmen behind, and they had taken cover behind the driver's cabin, one on either side, where they held his comrades back with alternating volleys. Two Gue Vesa were already down, and Voyle cursed as another was blasted from her feet as she tried to flank the mutants.
Unity!
He crawled and swerved towards them, sighting down his rifle as he charged. It was a precision weapon, ill-suited to such assaults, but he knew its rhythms better than his own mind, and his third shot brushed the nearest watchman's hood, setting it alight. The fourth bored a molten crater into its chest as it turned, throwing it backwards. An obscene hissing bubbled from behind its flame-wreathed mask as it tried to level its rifle at him. With a roar of loathing, Voyle barreled into it, sending it crashing into its comrade. The impact threw him to the ground, but he kept firing, riddling the entangled watchman with plasma bolts. He didn't stop, not even when they fell, then fell still. His hatred was too deep, too angry.
And the hunger gazes back at him from the void it has carved out in his soul, and then it speaks, for it has a voice. Voyle!
Voyle! Someone shouted, holding him up. He stiffened as stiff as he recognized the Stormlight.
We must go, his commander snapped. Their track! No time! More enemies come!
The fire warrior jabbed his rifle at the road ahead. A bipedal walker was striding through the wreckage of the vehicle that had blocked the convoy's path. It was similar to the one Voyle had spotted earlier, but its saddle was fitted with a massive cannon. The gun's spinning barrel was still smoking from the distraction he had just raked on the obstruction.
Move, Voyle!
They sprinted after the retreating vehicles, following the surviving soldier who had accompanied Akurio. Both the captured vehicles had picked up speed now, but they were still hobbled by their inability to turn on the narrow road. As the fleeing trio drew level with the car, a bolt of electricity struck the Gue Vesa, throwing him against the vehicle. Voyle leapt over the charred corpse that rebounded into his path and glanced over his shoulder. The warden was marching across the rubble in pursuit, flanked by her surviving watchmen. Worse still, the Strider was bearing down on the car with frightening speed, its cannon spinning up to fire. Moments later, a storm of high-velocity rounds rained down on its prey.
We're done,
Voyle realized, ducking as ricochets whistled past him. Suddenly, the car thrust forward, its engine roaring as it accelerated towards its hunter. The Strider lurched off the road, but the vehicle veered after it, its iron-shod tires clattering over the debris. There was a thunderous crash as it rammed the automaton. The strider's legs buckled and its saddle plunged forward, sliding along the car's roof and plowing a deep fissure in its wake. Voyle and Akurio dived aside as the wreckage hurled past them, still bearing its stiff-backed rider and cannon. The gun detonated when it hit the road, vomiting a fireball into the dark sky. "Sacred throne!" the Voyle growled, dredging up the old imperial curse as the car wheeled out of control and overturned. It spun about on its roof, shedding armor as it screeched along the road. Caught in its path, the warden was swept up and ground down, along with the watchman flanking her. Finally, the car's momentum gave out, leaving it wedged halfway up a mound of rubble.
"The Seeker!"
Akurio yelled over the transmitter. He was already on his feet and racing towards the wreckage.
"Rouse yourself, Porel!"
the Seeker commanded, his calm voice cutting through the cacophony that lingered in Adib's ears, ignoring the protest of her battered body. She uncurled from the fetal huddle she had adopted and rolled to her knees. Kui-Hai's sensor-studded faceplate loomed into view, appraising her.
"You are fortunate,"
the Seeker pronounced.
"Did you send the signal?"
Yes, Adib said, struggling for focus. Just before.
"Then come, we cannot linger here."
Kui-Hai turned away, ducking under the seats that hung from the inverted roof like stalactites. Through the smoke-filled gloom, Adib saw that the others had been much less fortunate. Faisal lay beside her, a spar of metal jutting from his chest. Daouk was on the cabin's far side, slumped against the hatch, the top of his face mashed into a round crown of blood and bone. The timekeeper was sprawled brokenly across the drive panel, his robes smoldering.
"Tread carefully,"
Kui-Hai cautioned as he stepped over the gasping fissure running through the floor. Choking on the smoke, Adib moved to follow. As she climbed over Faisal's body, his eyes opened.
"Adib, what?"
His words splintered into a blood-flecked cough, and he clutched at her. She took his hand instinctively, gripping it as a spasm rippled through his body. The predator she had glimpsed earlier was gone, along with its baleful magnetism. "He's in death. He is only himself," she sensed. "The emissary still lives," she shouted to Kui-Hai.
"His injury is mortal,"
the Seeker replied.
"You cannot help him."
Reaching the hatch, he heaved the hook aside and tugged at the opening lever, but it wouldn't budge. As the emissary's convulsions subsided, Adib leaned in close. "The Gog Eternal," she urged. "What is it?" "The truth, Faisal."
"Told you the truth?"
he wheezed as his eyes clouded.
"Greatest good."
His head fell back, revealing a circular scar under his chin. "That is a lie," Adib said sadly. "But I do not believe it is yours, old friend." She released Faisal's hand and crawled towards the Seeker. As she approached the fissure, an electronic burbling sounded from somewhere below her. Her drone. She leaned over the rift's lip and reached down, expecting to touch the ground. But there was nothing. The car must have come to rest above a cavity. She stretched further, and her fingers brushed smooth metal. "Seeker, I..." A cold blue light flared into life below, dazzling her. She jerked away, but something seized her wrist in a vice-like grip. "Do not be alarmed," a sterile voice boomed. "Your security is my primary directive." Adib shrieked as the warden yanked her through the fissure.
"Watchman, heading this way, Shash El,"
Voyle warned as a group of robed figures appeared on the road ahead.
"You must delay them,"
Akurio ordered.
"Yes, Shash El."
What else was there to say? They could not abandon an ethereal. After the crash, they'd climbed to the stranded car, where the fire warrior was wrestling with the hatch while Voyle covered the road. It hadn't taken long for more of the Order's troops to arrive, but as they drew closer, he saw that there was something new among them, something much larger. He sighted down his scope and grimaced. The hulking figure was swathed in the customary purple rose, but it was almost twice the height of its fellows. A bulbous helmet encased its head and shoulders, locked into place by heavy chains that crisscrossed its chest. Its visor was carved into the likeness of a cork, with a single lens at the center and smoking sensors affixed to each tooth. The giant's right arm split at the elbow, spawning a pair of armored tentacles that were wrapped around the haft of a massive industrial hammer. Its right arm was a weapon in its own right, bulging into a serrated claw that dragged along the ground behind it. They've given up on hiding their secrets, Voyle thought, targeting the cork-faced Hulk. As his plasma bolt seared its helmet, the giant swung his hammer up to protect his lens, almost as if it had read his mind. Moving like clockwork, the watchmen raised their rifles and retaliated with a volley of bullets, then stepped aside, opening a path for their champion. I can't put that thing down, Voyle realized as the behemoth broke into a lumbering charge. This is where I die. Then lower your weapon and leave, the voice suggested, slithering into his thoughts like a shameful secret. It spoke fluently now, its words were eloquent with somber authority. Voyle couldn't remember why he had ever questioned it. Because you were lost, child. There was a metallic creak behind him. Voyle turned suddenly and saw Q High emerge from the vehicle. I will assist the other seeker, a courier said, his voice seeming to come from some distant, meaningless place. They are gone, Q High said. Pour El Adib, all of them Stormlight. The ethereal turned to Voyle as if to speak. Instead, he moved, whipping a metal tube from his belt and whirling it towards the dazed man. It's elongated from both ends as it swept through the air. Its telescoped segment snapping free with a staccato burst of clicks. Click, 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 click. In the heartbeat it took to complete its arc, it had become a staff. It struck Voile's helmet and threw him off balance. As he fell against the vehicle, he saw the speaker twirl the weapon back and then thrust it forward into the visor of the giant that had climbed up behind Voyle while the voice held sway. The blunt tip shattered the mutant's cyclopean lens and drove through whatever lay before. Und go! The seeker shouted, and the behemoth shuddered as the staff's blade sprang free inside its skull. Kiwi High twisted the weapon, then wrenched it free, tearing away the creature's visor along with most of its face. As the giant toppled backwards, Voyle glimpsed a protean morass of tendrils and broken bones inside its head. Kiwi High leaped back into the cover as the watchman answered the champion's death with a salvo of bullets. Your actions have invited great danger, Guilherme, he said to Voyle. Yes, seeker, Voyle answered, lowering his head. Later. High whirled his staff, and it contracted back into a tube. We must go. Support team, your status, a courier transmitted as they retreated down the mound with Voyle bringing up the rear. The track is clear, Azul replied. Do you need us, Sas-El? Negative. We are en route to you now. The voice almost had me, Voyle thought as he followed the two Xenos. Child, you must know, Voyle hissed, biting his lip until he drew blood. Get out of my head. But now that it had tasted his soul, he knew it never would. The invisible circle. Unity. Chasvre Poral triggered the jetpack of her crisis battlesuit and launched herself into the air, arcing high above the spaceport, ensconced within the control cocoon of the hulking machine. Protected by multiple layers of angular nanocrystal armor, she felt invulnerable. It had been many years since her duties had called upon her to wear the battlesuit in combat, but the old discipline had returned the instant she had activated the machine and its sensors had interfaced with her nervous system, transforming her into a towering bipedal tank. It has been too long, she thought fiercely. As she neared the city's dome, she cut her thrusters and plunged back toward the spaceport, confident in her armor's durability. She came down hard, pulverizing an enemy warrior under her massive piston-like legs and sending tremors through the crowd. Triggering the flamethrower attached to her suit's right arm, she spun at the waist, washing the dead guard's comrades in a whooshing arc of fire. Their robes were scorched away in seconds, revealing the misshapen forms beneath. "These are not common Voyle," Voyle judged as one of the burning figures flared at her with a scythe-like claw. "A mutant strain, perhaps." She stomped over their charred corpses and fired a fusillade of plasma bolts with her secondary weapon, targeting the guards on the far side of the roof. A squadron of gun drones swept by overhead, their path guided by her battlesuit's tactical system. The ship had carried 80 of the saucer-like machines, and Voyle had activated them all when she had received the Seeker's signal. "Malkaor." The word meant spider, but the code signified a great peril awakened. The protocol for the situation was clear: ensure the ship's safety at all costs. Accordingly, Voyle had launched a surprise attack on the port's guards immediately, but they had reacted with uncanny swiftness and a total lack of fear. "They fight like machines," Voyle observed as a pair of three-armed deviants broke cover and charged towards her. One sported a muscular tentacle, the other a chitinous appendage that ended in a snapping pincer. They were bigger and better armored than the others she had encountered, their heads protected by silk helmets bearing ribbed crests. "For greatest good," they hissed, their words slurring as if their mouths weren't shaped for speech. Before Voyle could fire, a lanky avian figure sprang past her and raced to meet the mutants with a hooting cry. The fire warrior clicked her tongue with irritation as she recognized the crude carnivore, though she had no idea which of the two it was. She had fought alongside the pair in service to the exalted Kiwi High for many years, yet she still couldn't tell them apart. "The Yasu Kaor forges strange bonds," the Seeker had instructed when she had joined his circle. "But it is their very strangeness that makes them strong." Voyle's suit chimed a warning. Something landed on its blocky shoulders. A moment later, the second crew vaulted from its perch to join the fray. The carnivores wheeled about the mutants in a feral dance, hacking, stabbing, and feinting with their broad-bladed machetes, then leaping away. Always one step ahead of the ungainly mutants, Voyle did not doubt the outcome of the contest, but her allies' frivolity irked her. "The Seeker has stuffed you well," she observed, "but you remain beasts." She felt a twinge of pain as an explosive slug dented her battlesuit's left arm. It was a sympathetic sensation generated by the suit's cocoon, sharp enough to bind her to the machine, but not enough to distract her. Her sensors pinpointed the aggressor in moments. A sniper crouched on a tower to her left. An evaluation of the enemy's capabilities flashed across her awareness, relayed by her battlesuit's tactical systems. The threat was minimal, so she dispatched a pair of drones to eradicate it and continued her advance, leaving the frenzied crew to their game. The last of the guards had taken cover behind a cluster of machinery. Drones buzzed about them, kept at bay by the defenders' disciplined volleys. Voyle strode towards their position, pinning them down with a hail of plasma bolts as she approached. When she was in range, she scoured their shelter with fire. "Disharmony, protest, dissolution," she decreed, quoting the Yasuka Or as her enemies burned. She rotated her battlesuit, scanning the rooftop. The fighting was over. Even the crew had finished their foes, so they were still hacking away at the corpses, jabbering at one another as they tried to make sense of their outlandish victims. The Seeker had forbidden them from meeting the dead, but their fascination could not be completely curtailed. "Forward perimeter is secure, Shazvre," a voice reported on her transmission link. Hurel, the leader of the first UVSA support teams. Something was playing havoc with their communication systems, and the signal was badly distorted. "Confirmed, UVSA UI," Voyle replied. "I have 3 dead and 3 more wounded, Shazvre. Permission to evacuate them to the ship." "Denied. Remain at your post." "Baumann is in a bad shape." I will dispatch a salvation team to your position, Voyle cut the link. The casualties were significant, but she didn't share the Stormlight sentimentality towards the human auxiliaries. She was more concerned by the number of drones she had lost. Her strategic display recorded 39 damaged or destroyed. When enemy reinforcements arrived, the situation would rapidly become untenable. She switched her transmitter to long range. Seeker! Predictably, she was met by a howling electronic whine that had flooded the channel shortly after the fighting commenced. Coming to a decision, Voyle stamped back to the crew. They looked up from their butchery as she loomed over them. "Bad meat!" one of them grunted, holding a glistening tentacle. "Evil!" Its companion added sagely. "Enter the city," Voyle commanded, speaking slowly. "Find our master." The carnivores exchanged a glance, then sprang up and spirited away. "It is almost as if they already know where he is," Voyle mused. And maybe they did. She had reluctantly accepted that the savage's bond with the Seeker was tighter or perhaps deeper than her own. Her battlesuit strategic display blipped as another drone signature went dark. She frowned as the rest of the squadron followed in rapid succession. Somewhere in the spaceport, the enemy was still active. Voyle checked the squadron's last known location and hissed through her teeth. The Hunger Bay. The truck rumbled along the dark streets, its headlights boring a tunnel through the gloom. Voyle was driving, with Zul beside him. If anyone could retrace their outbound journey, it was the squad's pathfinder. The rest of the survivors were crouched in the back, their rifles leveled over the sides. The district was deserted, its citizens slaves presumably banished to their hovels, but an expectant watchfulness pervaded the streets. Every one of the fugitives could sense it, Tau and human alike, but none as keenly as the Seeker.
"The dissonance here runs deep,"
Guilherme reflected.
"Yet I have learned nothing. Voyle sprang the trap too soon."
Was that really true? The threads of ambivalent fate had woven Ulver Voyle into this tangle. There was no reasoning behind it, for the firmament of reality was blind, but there was a rhythm to it. It was a seeker's path to listen and learn, then tune the composition to serve the greater good, conducting events by intuition alone. And Guilherme's instincts had urged him to trust his broken ULA. Perhaps Voyle had not sprung the trap too soon, but just in time.
"Seeker, a question."
The fire warrior crouched beside him began hesitantly.
"Speak your mind, Stormlight,"
Guilherme urged.
"You are quite certain that Porel Adip was dead?"
"I could not save her," Guilherme said. "I could not attempt it." He had seen Adip fall into the fissure, had even stepped forward to help her, then stopped when he'd heard the soulless voice booming from the rift and understood what lay beneath the wrecked car. The risk had been too great.
"Her loss will not be without purpose,"
he promised.
"As you say, Seeker."
But there was no conviction in a curious voice. Guilherme could not share the fire warrior's sorrow. Like love, hate, and the myriad other shades of emotion that elevated or degraded his kin, sadness was a conceit he had transcended. That was what it meant to be a Yasu Aum.
"The void within stands vigil against the void without,"
Guilherme whispered to the lost city. "Take the right," Erzul instructed as the truck approached another junction. She was always the best of us, Voyle thought, obeying. She should have been our Yue Vesawi. Maybe the others would still be alive then.
"You led them to ruin,"
the voice agreed.
"Because you are lost."
It hadn't let up throughout the escape, cajoling one moment, then threatening the next, but mostly just wearing him down. The worst part was that he needed it now.
"And so I need you, Ulver, as do your kindred in the Cock Eternal."
Why did you shoot the watchman? Voyle asked Urzul, trying to shut out his blessed tormentor. Back at the manufactory when I ordered it. Why did you obey? Because you are the Gue Vesawi, Urzul answered without hesitation. You trust me? Should I not? Not at all. I'll warn you when to stop, Voyle said seriously. Why did you order it? Urzul asked. Because they're monsters. The Imperium dumps everything but itself as a monster, the voice observed. Sometimes that's true. I don't understand, Urzul said. Sometimes the monsters are real. Then you are a monster too, Oliver Voyle. I know it. He spat, remembering the taste of rotten flesh. What are you? He sensed he shouldn't encourage the agency, but he had to know. A traveler who became a god in service to a greater god. My children revere me as the Animus Alpha. Why can't I hear you? We share the same divine star-spawned seed, though you are not of my blood. That is why you were invisible to me for so long. Voyle, Urzul said, eyeing him wearily, you're not making any sense. What do you want with me? He pressed, ignoring her. I offer you freedom, Oliver. Your masters have deceived you. That is a lie. They are not liberators, not oppressors. They saved me. They gelded you body and soul. You felt any desire, says, obedience since they took you. It's for the common good, Voyle muttered, remembering the endless mantras of self-sublimation and the contentment that tranquility wafers had brought. Unity, slavery. The Animus Alpha corrected, and as Voyle recognized its truth, the invisible god slipped past his guard. Turn left, Urzul snapped. He turned right. Voyle, what are... His left hand thrust out and grabbed her hair. Her instincts had always been razor sharp, and she reacted quickly, snatching her combat knife free and swinging it towards him in the same motion. If he had hesitated even a moment, it might have been enough. But he didn't hesitate. Before the blade could connect, he rammed her face into the dashboard. No! Voyle tried to scream, but he no longer had a mouth. It belonged to the voice now. Boral's burst cannon vented smoke as it spewed plasma bolts at the four-armed abominations infesting the Hunger Bay. The creatures zigzagged between banks of machinery as they circled her, their sinuous forms hunched into an instant like scuttle. Their bodies were sheathed in blue chitin that flared into spines at their joints and along the ridge of their bulbous skulls. In place of jaws, their faces trailed thorn-tipped tentacles that whipped about as the creatures moved. Drones skimmed around the beasts, chattering electronically as they harried them with bursts of plasma. But the machines were falling faster than their prey, their rigid minds confounded by their enemies' erratic movements. Voyle hissed as another of the flying discs was yanked from the air and shredded. The beast's claws were improbably strong. Even her battlesuit's armor wouldn't last long against a prolonged attack. There are too many, Voyle judged, immolating an abomination with a spurt of fire as it veered towards her. Her flamethrower's ammunition gauge chimed a warning. The weapon had already been running low when she had entered the hangar and engaged these infiltrators. There had been 7 when she had arrived, but more had crawled from the ducts lining the walls, arriving faster than she could call them. She had summoned all her forces, but they had turned up sporadically, never giving her the numbers to mount a concentrated counterattack. Who whoever sat him had been overwhelmed within seconds of their arrival. Their drones had fared better because of their mobility, but less than 20 remained now, and the chitinous onslaught hadn't fluttered. A battle couldn't be won. Kavre uburka, Boral transmitted to the ship's flight deck. Withdraw the whispering hand immediately. The Concordance must be alerted to this treachery.
I cannot abandon the exalted one,
The pilot protested. We must assume he is lost, Boral abhorred the words, but Kui-Hai had made her duty clear. The ship will be overrun if you delay. Authorization cipher follows. She sent the cord as her cannon finally overheated and fell silent. I understand, Chasvre. Signal me when you are on board. That is not an option. Go! Boral kept the beasts at bay with brief bursts from her flamethrower as the docking clamps disengaged and released the slumbering ship. Before the echoes had faded, the ship's vessel's engines rumbled into life, sending tremors through the chamber. Come then, Boral whispered as her flamethrower ran dry. The tentacle abomination surged forward, vaulting over one another in their eagerness to reach her. She clapped the first one aside with a clumsy swing of her cannon and rammed her flamethrower into the face of the next, shattering its skull. They were upon her, hissing as they raked at her armor. Within seconds, her battlesuit's damage indicators were flashing red in countless places. She ignored it, knowing there was nothing more to be done. Chanting the mantra of certitude, she stood motionless, waiting. The hangar's massive external door slid open behind her, unleashing a shriek of void-racked air. A heartbeat later, Boral was wrenched into the emptiness beyond, trailing a string of chitinous horrors. As she whirled about in the vacuum, she glimpsed the departing glow of the Whispering Hand's engines. The circle closes, she said, and overloaded her battlefield's power core. For a brief moment, she burned brighter than the engines. I didn't warn Erzul, Voyle thought bitterly, remembering his promise to the Pathfinder. He sat stiffly in his chair, his hands steering the track of their own accord. He couldn't even turn his head to check if the woman slab behind him was still breathing. His comrades hadn't seen the violence that had transpired in the cabin, nor could they know the treachery playing out now. I've betrayed them all.
No, you have saved them, Ulfer, along with yourself.
The voice was his, but the words were not. You lied to me, Voyle accused, struggling to break free.
Where are you taking us? You shall all be enlightened, but the ethereal among you is of singular importance. The Seeker? How? What you know, I now know, child.
Shame washed over Voyle in a corrosive wave, scouring him of all the hopes and hates that had bedeviled him since his long fall began. Finally, all that remained was a bleak yearning for nothingness.
It is your shadow to burn, the Storm Knight had advised. Only you can light the fire.
Hesitantly at first, then with growing conviction, Voyle began to recite the 19th mantra of self-sublimation, the winter that rises within, focused on attaining a state of perfect stillness, conditioning its aspirants to slow their breathing and lock their muscles rigid as they purge their minds of desire. Voyle had always been drawn to its oblique words and the ephemeral oblivion they offered. Emptiness, unwound, blinds the light that blinds unseen. He repeated the spiraling phrase over and over, speaking with his mind until his body listened and remembered. Like creeping frost, his grip on the wheel tightened, then froze, locking the truck to its current path. He heard from somewhere far away, he heard his own voice calling to him, wielding him, reasoning, then railing, becoming ever more strident as the road ahead curved, yet the vehicle didn't follow. None of it mattered. None of it was real. But the deceiver was blind to such truth, and in its turmoil, its control frayed. The lapse was brief, but it was enough for Voyle to stomp down on the accelerator. Emptiness, unwound. With a roar, the truck leapt forward, its frame rattling as its wheels left the road. Blinds, the light. The usurper fled his mind as the building ahead rushed towards the windscreen that blinds unseen. Blood tide. Voyle sighed, closing his eyes. Q High hit the ground hard, but his armor absorbed the worst of the impact. He rolled with a fall and swept to his feet. For a moment he stood motionless, gazing inward to assess his body. There was some damage, but nothing significant. As in the recent crash, his armor and training had served him well, though he would not welcome a third such incident any time soon. He scanned the surrounding buildings but saw nobody. Up ahead, the wrecked truck was still blazing, its death throes casting a red haze over the street.
Your truth dies with you, Oliver Voyle,
Q High said, then turned his attention to the living. A courier knelt nearby, wrestling with his helmet. Its dome was cracked and sparks flickered behind its shattered lessons. One of the Guilherme lay further along the road, his neck twisted at a strange angle. None of the others had jumped from the speeding vehicle in time.
How will we reach the ship?
A courier asked, finally tearing his helmet free.
We cannot,
the ethereal replied.
It is too late. Either the ship is gone, or it is in the enemy's hands now.
Then only vengeance remains to us, the Fire Warrior said bitterly, throwing his ruined helmet aside.
Vengeance is immaterial. No, we shall keep to the shadows and learn our enemy's truth.
To what purpose, Seeker? A courier rose to his feet unsteadily. His scalp was scorched and bleeding.
To destroy it.
Kiwi High sliced in the air with his right hand, indicating an outcome already proven.
It must be done. Of this I am certain.
With respect, we are but two.
We will find others. I suspect this broken world harbors many secrets, Chazel.
Kui Hai allowed himself the ghost of a smile, though it passed unseen within his helm.
And we are four.
A courier swung around as a rangy avian figure dropped down beside him, landing in a feral crouch. A moment later, a second one leapt from the roof behind to join it.
For the greater good!
The Groot carnivores growled together. The spiral. Oblivion. Poor El Adib opened her eyes as the door of her chamber opened. A Tau stood in the doorway, a female of the water caste like herself, but much younger, and clad in the purple robes Adib had come to loathe. So Faisal was not the last of his embassy, Adib observed, rising from her chair. 11 of us remain, the newcomer replied. She shared the malignant vigor that Fashal had projected, though her aura was less pronounced. I am Por Ui Beyal. Por Vre Faishal was my bonded mate. His death was difficult, Adib said flatly. His death served the greatest good, Beyal said without a trace of sorrow. I trust your injuries have been attended to, Por El. You know they have, traitor. Several days had passed since the Order's minions had recovered her from the wrecked vehicle, along with the monstrous warrior that had seized her. Since then, she had been confined to this room and her questions had gone unanswered. You are aware that your attack on my embassy will be construed as an act of war, she challenged. You attacked us, Beyal demurred serenely, without provocation. I do not accept that, but I advise you to release me without delay. Abinah softened her tone. Perhaps an accord may yet be reached. That is our aspiration, Beyal extended her hands palms upward. The Korg Eternal has embraced the greatest good. It has always sought an alliance with the Tau Empire. Then release me, as you wish. Beyal bowed her head. Please follow me, Porel. Adib didn't move. You agree? She asked doubtfully. The Animus Alpha will address all your concerns, Beyal assured her. Who? He is the first architect of the Kog Eternal, but many of us have come to see him as father. I believe you shall too. Adib's eyes narrowed as she sobbed at something lurking in the passageway behind Bayal. Your pardon, Porel, Bayal said, catching her glance. I wanted to introduce my son, Gebra. She called over her shoulder. Enter, child. There is nothing to fear. A squat figure shambled in, its heavy-set form swaddled in robes. Longingly, Bayal pulled its hood back and smiled at her prisoner. Adib stared, aghast, struggling to make sense of the infant's face. He is but 3 Tausir, Bayal crooned, but children grow swiftly here. As the hybrid thing grinned at her through a veil of tendrils, Adib's composure finally unraveled, and a dark thought flashed through her mind. Perhaps the xenophobia of the Guela is not a sickness, but a strength. OutCaste by Peter Fehervari, from the anthology The Dark Coil, Damnation. A Tau chooses neither its caste nor its true name. We are blood-born to the first, and born by blood to the second, named for what we have done and might yet do. And like ourselves, our true names are not carved in stone. The Tauva. The warrior crouches in darkness, eyes locked on the softly glowing lenses of the helmet in its hands, remembering, seeking a name. When I completed my training and stepped into the path of fire, I was summoned before the academy commander alongside my fellow Shashal cadets for the naming. Who better to decipher a warrior's true name than the master who has honed that living weapon, while others were honored for their endurance or agility or precision with arms. I was named for my skill in reading the hearts of my comrades. Jikara, the mirror. You have been their shining core, he said. You recognize and draw on their strength, reflecting it back threefold. He predicted a path of leadership, confirming what I already knew, that I was first amongst equals. Yes, there was pride, but it was hard-earned, for though there is no prejudice against females under the Tauva, few of us burned brightly on the fire path. I dreamt I would eclipse Shadowsun herself. She frowns at the memory. The arrogance of impossible youth past, and the price that will never pass. Sighing, she strokes her helmet with calloused fingers. It has been with her since her first, all too sweet taste of war. A new forge, Shashla. I embarked on my first campaign, alight with a conviction that did not flicker in the cold winds of war. Our enemy was the Bihe-Gal, a race of green-skinned beasts that infested vast tracts of the galaxy and made frequent raids into Tau territory. They were a brutal, ugly species that lived for war, yet made a mockery of the craft, fighting in mobs that swept about the battlefield intoxicated by their own fury. We spun circles of death around them, luring them into one trap after another, decimating them from a distance with firepower they could not hope to match, and then falling back before they overran us with sheer numbers.
It was a flawless execution of Kauinon that confirmed the Tau mastery of war and my own mastery of hearts. For though I did not lead by rank, my comrades followed me regardless, inspired by my example and my words. Indeed, words flowed so freely for me that our Shashui joked that I must be a waterborne changeling. I was beyond fear or doubt, certain of my place in the perfect geometry of the Tao Va, untouchable. And when the Shasui fell, none were surprised that I was chosen to take his place. A veteran in my youth, I believed myself a hero. I was too young to understand that easy victories have no heroes. She shivers as her fingers find the scar. Abhorrent, reverent. She traces the shallow fault line from the helmet's crown to the chin. It is a mere ghost of the rift that was once there, but it is truth that is undiminished. V'ha'ank, topos, pokaja. More partly words and petty wars fought against inept or feeble foes. More easy victories to burnish my pride. O Barai, a small planet on the fringes of the second expansion. Barai was uncannily beautiful, its arid plains reminiscent of revered Tau itself. It was a natural home to the people, worthy of risk.
There are Guela here, a cadre Chasseau told us. Their imperium lays claim to this world, but their shadow has grown pale in this region, sapped by distant conflicts. If we strike swift and hard, the imperium will turn a blind eye.
Guela, humans. They were an ancient race steeped in belligerent superstition. Yet they were neither fools nor savages. I thrilled at the prospect of facing a worthy enemy at last. Perhaps I would earn the rank of Chasvray here.
The disfigured helmet gazes back at her, challenging, accusing. It has been cruelly repaired by her own hands, functional but ugly. An artisan of the earth caste could have restored it to perfection, but perfection will have been a lie.
The Guela colonists fought fiercely, but their technology and tactics were primitive beside our own. Only their vaunted Imperial Guard gave us pause. A single regiment who had been promised the planet as a home if they could hold it. The Chasseau offered them the opportunity to surrender, but his terms were harsh and they spat in his face. The outcome troubled me because they were honorable foes. But when I mentioned these doubts to Machasvray, he laughed.
Do you believe the Chasseau wanted them to surrender? This war calls for the killing blow, not the open hand. A clean sweep, not complications. She nods at her scarred shadow, acknowledging the moment when perfection withered and doubt blossomed. The moment when her true name became a lie.
The guardsmen made their last stand in Oberei primary city, fortifying the walls and rallying a militia of thousands. But it was an empty gesture. Stealth teams infiltrated the bastion and destroyed their artillery with surgical precision, leaving the defenders helpless against our long-range missiles and railguns. We razed the city without losing a single warrior. Yet never once during that nightmare bombardment did the Imperials attempt to surrender. My comrades derided them for fools, but I was silent. As I expected, the Chasseau decreed we would take no prisoners. Scouring the ruins would be dangerous close-quarter work, so he unleashed the Krut, our alien auxiliaries, upon the broken city. They were bloodthirsty avian predators, little better than beasts, but loyal and perfectly suited to the task. And yet, The thought of those savages running riot amongst fallen warriors reviled me. If the rumors were true, the Crute had a taste for the flesh of their enemies. She is no longer a shining mirror, but she's still strong and she still serves the greater good. Not because it is perfect, but because everything else is less so. Now the strength she reflects is dark and fractured, so perhaps imperfection will be her key. Even now I cannot explain the compulsion, but I disobeyed the Shah's edict and led my squad into the ruins, lying to them and playing on their trust, seeking something I couldn't name. A swirling miasma of black smoke transformed the city into a shadow labyrinth haunted by charred corpses and twitching things that had no business being alive. Wordlessly we killed them as we passed. It was a mercy, yet I sensed my squad tightening with reflexive revulsion and felt their unspoken question. Why? They were my closest comrades, the ones I hoped to swear that Li sera with, yet I had carried them into this filth, rubbing their face in a carnage which I would prefer to keep at arm's length. Why? As we pressed deeper, the moans of the dying echoed around us, sometimes broken by the gleeful hoots of the ravening Crute. The city square we came upon a pack of the beasts huddled around a mound of corpses, and I learned that the rumors about our allies were true. One of them saw us and chittered, rocking back and forth on its talons, trailing red ruin from its serrated beak. Then it cocked its head and beckoned, sly and mocking, inviting us to join the feast. Two of my comrades wretched inside their helmets as we backed away, stumbling in our eagerness to distance ourselves from these vile allies. Lost in smoke and revulsion, I tripped over a corpse in a smoldering greatcoat and froze. That dead man's eyes were wide open in a face scorched to the bone, looking right at me. Absurdly, his high-peaked cap was still intact, its melted rim fused to his skull. Why? I might have asked it aloud. Though of what I have no idea. The Guilherme surged up with impossible hate-driven vitality, something bright and furiously alive buzzing in his hands, sweeping towards me. I staggered back, throwing up my rifle to block the blow, and I was torn asunder in a storm of tortured metal that shook my entire body. I heard my comrades' wild shouts and the bursts of their carbines as the whirling chain blade kissed my helmet. The warrior reaches up and touches the other's scar, the one that can never be repaired because it cuts deeper than flesh or bone, proclaiming a darkness that was perhaps always there. Her comrades killed the Commissar, a heartbeat before he killed her, but still a heartbeat too late. Afterwards, there were comrades no more, and there have been none since. The flaw has made her an outcast amongst her own kind, denying her the bond of the Li sera, but it has also forged her into something more, crouching in the darkness. As the darkness crouches inside her, she finally names her truth. Chikara, the broken mirror.